Hey guys, so with this being more or less the final episode of the year, I thought I might start by answering the question, did it end on a high note? And for the most part, yes, except for one major blunder with this episode, which I'm sure many people who have watched it have already seen. But more so, one thing I did like is how the way this episode was paid, how this episode ended and felt like the culmination of the previous episodes that came before, and now with this episode we're basically transitioning into the next and more or less the final major story arc of this of the series when the anime returns. With that said, this episode gives us Mickey Hease's perspective on the relationship between him and Camel, and a little bit of a flashback of the time they spent together. And one thing I like about this flashback, like even more among everything that's going on, is it adds just enough to the tragedy of Camel's downfall, and just him giving just how much he gave into his insanity and denial of the fact that he was even dead to begin with. Like the man could just not accept that he was dead, and it is an interesting perspective of showing just how there are some spirits who just won't accept the fact that they're dead. Like they live with too many regrets, and that is honestly I think a very real thing. And when you look at real life and whatnot. But on top of giving us that extra little bit more insight into Mickey Heese as a character, and while also still giving us a little bit of like Mickey Heese as a character, like I feel this episode just from him like kind of reminiscing about Camel, it does give us a little bit more insight into who Mickey Heese is as a character, and how he also compares himself as a father, frankly. Of course, seeing how this story is still centered around Chocolave having killed Camel, we obviously see him make his return from the dead, but even more powerful than before. And basically, him doing what he did in this episode, it was him owning up to what he did, and the only way he knew how, which is to try and put Camel's spirit to rest. But by the end of the episode, we learned that after he was revived, Chocolave, in the process of being revived, Chocolave willingly gave up his eyesight. And despite him saying it wasn't as like penance for his sin or whatever, he also weirdly kind of contradicted himself by saying he knew it was the only way he could apologize to both Camel and the kids. Like him giving up his eyesight, it was a sacrifice he felt he had to make in order to truly forgive himself, and the only way he knew to ask for forgiveness as well. And now, with that said, the pacing of this episode is, I'm just gonna be real with everyone. The pacing of this episode is all over the fucking place. Cause the thing is, this episode, it does the usual thing where they rearrange scenes and moments from the manga. The way they rearrange all this, to me as a manga reader, was near, if not completely, incomprehensible. At least when it came to this very first half, like the first like major chunk of this episode. Oh my god, I cannot tell you how hard it was to keep track of what the fuck was going on sometimes. And not helped by the fact that this episode covers 198 to 207, so as you can imagine, on top of there being like the rearrangement shit, there was also more than a few large chunks from this episode that are missing, and that were in the manga. And granted, most of it is from just the fight itself. But this is honestly one such time where cutting out what they did kind of just overall ruined the flow and cohesion of the episode. And the episode, and granted, maybe anime only viewers will have an easier time with this episode than I did. But this is an example of my greatest fear of this reboot only having 52 episodes take shape, which is this needed to. The reboot needed almost about the same amount of episodes as original anime, maybe a couple more. And here's the thing: I'm not like shitting on the animators, the directors, everyone on the, like, I'm sure everyone on the crew worked on, who was working on this series, are doing their damnedest to make this work with what they're given. And visually, I will say this was actually a great episode, especially the final scene in the episode between Yo and Choco and the reveal that he's lost his eyesight. All that, like, that was visually and heart-wrenchingly beautiful in the way that whole scene was basically structured. But like, it's episodes like this where I do also grow more concerned, and the crew grew more concerned, and make me realize the crew needed more time. They needed more episodes. Just they needed more everything in order to, I think, to properly make this work. Because as is, like, I don't know. It feels like it's only reaching a fraction of the potential. It feels like when episodes like this come along, it feels like the material is only reaching a fraction of what potential it actually has. And I guess if I'm being fair about it, the pacing did eventually even out by the second half of the episode, but everything else in that first half just, yeah, I don't know what even to say about that first half, frankly. Like, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know. But yeah, with that very large problem aside, though, when the episode does slow down, we get a moment with Anna and Manta, which seems to indicate that Matamune will return at some point. And the way she says it definitely indicates that the clever cat might have left sort of an imprint on Yo in order for later when he finally does face Hao. And even Hao's moment of reminiscing about Matamune before leaving definitely seems to enforce that notion that Matamune is going to make a return, and he is going to play a major like last ditch effort kind of role against Hao, I think. And if I'm remembering the events correctly, Anna saying Matamune is the final piece of the puzzle to defeat Hao is more meant in the tone of the final piece of the puzzle to save him, weirdly enough. Like, trust me, you'll pretty much know what that means when we get to it. But this episode also gave us confirmation of what happened to Anna's ability to read people's thoughts, which is that at some point, either during or after Yo had defeated that demon, that was basically the living embodiment of her fear, her hatred, all that. After Yo defeated that demon, Hal had basically reclaimed his ability, the ability in order to read thoughts from Anna, which once again makes him all the more dangerous than he already was, while also building onto the fact that this reincarnation of Hal is truly his most dangerous, because as we're seeing, he's able to reclaim aspects of his power with such ease, and it really is indicating just how powerful returning to his roots have made him. And yeah, honestly, not necessarily. And aside from that, though, not necessarily with the anime, but strictly because the manga had the same issue. But I feel this whole thing with the golem ended a little abruptly, and felt like the authors were inserting Anna into the story because she's been on the sideline for so long, which frankly does kind of undercut like Choco's moment a touch, but I can understand why. And yeah, overall, I just like how this episode was pretty much about Choco just coming to terms with what he had done, and closing this chapter on his closing the book on this chapter of his life and finally moving forward. So but yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. I'm on Twitter, Analyst Crunchyroll. Be sure to hit the notification bell, hit the subscribe button, and just share the video around, guys. Dark Knight of Anime, signing off. Later, everyone.